Welcome everybody to the bi-monthly International Women's Writing Guild bi-monthly open mic. And this is Thursday, October 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern US. I am so excited. I'm Kelly Dumar with the Guild, and I am so excited to feature the poet and faculty member at the Guild, Vanessa Jimenez Gabb, today, as well as all of you who have signed up for our open mic. We're so glad you're here. I just want to say that Vanessa has been teaching with us both in our summer intensives for 2 years, teaching advanced poetry. And she's also taught for us online. She's been part of the Women Writing to the World webinar. And so she's really gotten to know us really, really well. And we have gotten to know her. And Vanessa is from Brooklyn, and that's where she's hailing from to read to us today. And I think we got introduced to Vanessa through Yun Wei, if I remember, and that was a wonderful thing that Yun did, was to give us your information. So let me just formally introduce Vanessa. And then I'm also going to orient you a little bit to, she's going to read for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have about 20 minutes for Q&A and discussion. And I'm going to welcome you to put your questions right into the chat room. And I'm not sure if we'll have a chance to turn everybody on, turn anyone on to make a live comment or anything, but please feel free to put all your comments into the chat room. So Vanessa is the author of Images for Radical Politics, which was the editor's choice in the 2015 Rescue Press Black Box Poetry Prize contest, and the forthcoming Pink Salt Rescue Press 2021. So you've got your next poetry book coming out in 2021 called Pink Salt. Wonderful. Vanessa is a graduate of Poly Prep Country Day School in New York City and Tufts University, and received an MA in English from St. John's University and an MFA in Creative Writing Poetry from CUNY in Brooklyn College, where she was the recipient of the 2010 Hyman Brown Award in Poetry. In 2012, she founded the literary project 5 Quarterly with debut writer Chrissy Van Meter. She's taught at St. John's University and Newark Academy, and for Brooklyn Poets and for us. And she currently offers private tutorials and editing services. She's from and lives in Brooklyn, New York. I will be putting Vanessa's details about her website and different ways that you can follow up on Vanessa's work and her book, which you can, the link is at our website. So that was a big mouthful, but I want to have, before I turn the mic over to Vanessa, I really want to put each one of you to work a little bit. You know, reading and hearing poetry from a brilliant poet like Vanessa for the first time in a reading, it can be a little bit challenging to sort of just grab onto some of those nuggets because we're hearing this beautiful poetry and we're not seeing it in print. So I want to read to you this endorsement from Brenda Shaughnessy, the poet Brenda Shaughnessy, that is part of on the back of Vanessa's book. And I'm going to have us use that as a framework for you to listen. So even if you just grab one of these nuggets and put it in the chat room, it'll, I think, give you a little bit of way to sort of enter into the richness of what you're receiving from Vanessa today. So let me tell you what Brenda Shaughnessy says, and then I'm going to make a couple of repetitions. Brenda says, the world is broken. Poet Vanessa Jimenez Gabb knows, but she picks up the tiny pieces, shattered and scattered everywhere with her loving hands. She's a poet who reports the devastating news and pokes holes in the paper to give us light. There is sky on the street. There is hope in the hell. There is recognition in the murk. What a capacious heart. What visionary intelligence. What a devotion to the way love transforms, at least as thoroughly as does destruction. I trust the wise, fearless poet's sense of beauty and justice. I trust her words to take us deep into the future. We need her voice resounding there. We need her poetry witnessing and singing here now. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be putting what I want you to be thinking about, looking for a little nugget. So if you just capture one nugget, if everybody captured one nugget, so listen for, I should say, a sign of her loving hands picking up the shatter, or the holes poked in the paper to give you light? Or do you hear some hope in hell? Do you recognize her capacious heart, her visionary intelligence, her devotion to the way love transforms as thoroughly as destruction? Listen for her fearless sense of beauty and justice. And then also for her words that we need to take into the future. I'm going to see if this will paste into the chat room. Yep. Okay. I made that list into the chat room. Vanessa, welcome. We are so excited to hear from you.
Hi, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And Kelly, as always, ever the hostess and so generous. I'm so humbled. Thank you for reminding me that I write poetry. For others who are here now, Kelly and I were chatting for a few minutes prior to this, and I've been working on a novel this past year. So working in a slightly different register, it's really nice to be reminded that I do have a book coming out next fall. So I will be reading a few poems, about 5 poems from that. And it's so nice to hear Brenda's words and Kelly's words about my previous text. And I hope you can pick up on some of what Kelly is directing us to, and whatever else you may get from this, especially through the lens of our current moment. The poems that I will be reading from my upcoming collection called Pink Salt were written prior to our current moment. But I guess for me, one thing that I wanted to express is how much the current moment for me has always been our moment in a way, sadly, and beautifully and terrifyingly. And the events of the last few months, I think, have really just exposed that and laid bare some of that. So I'm hoping, that's all just to say, I'm hoping that some of this still feels very relevant, despite being written prior to such a formidable event, such a collective trauma we're all going through. My first collection, Images for Radical Politics, that Kelly referenced, I guess I hope about many things, but for me, quite simply, it's about the deterioration of about a 13 year long relationship in the context of capitalism. So how the personal and the political played off each other. Pink Salt is about falling back into love in the midst of capitalism. So I kind of see the two books as counterparts. And I'll be reading, like I said, 5 poems toward the end of the book. Okay, this first one is called La Sloteria. That was the name of a Mexican restaurant in Brooklyn, in Cobble Hill. If you're familiar with Brooklyn at all, it has since closed. It shuttered its doors a few years ago. But I still really love the name, La Sloteria. And okay, so here we go. 2 people sit at a table inside and become 4. They become 4 because 2 people they know walk in and join them at this table. They have not seen each other in days or years. They become 4 now, but also became 4 before. They were themselves and also many former selves, except they were somewhere and went somewhere else and became less or more. They have sat at many tables. But they talk about sitting exactly here years ago at this exact place almost. Did we come with bad timing, they say, knowing change cannot be unchanged? They talk of what they do every day with their time, and how they speak says so much about how they view themselves. They add words to each other's sentences and laugh at what they make. They want to know how much is too little. They talk of a lack of water or experience. They give each other advice and say, thank you for teaching me about what not to do. Thank you for the surprise of who you are now. Are you hungry, they ask? Are you sure? How incredible is it that they have wandered into the same moment? There are many places to be, and they have chosen this one. They feel this wonder and repeat it, even though repeating it does not bring them any more sense. Why not, they say, why not sit together in this night, despite everything that has happened? X them, they pay for one another and say, please don't, please, let's split the burden of what this has cost us. It is not guilt exactly, but more tribal. There is wine and food and the light. They ask about getting home. They ask about what will happen after. Where are you going? It will take more days or years for them to meet this way again with cause. The same people or the same. They go away, but differently. They were here, and sometimes it's like they were here. I think for me, that poem is really trying to use repetition and negation to try and capture the ineffable of the concrete moment of running into people at a restaurant in Brooklyn, and trying to grab onto something abstract. Prospect Park. Even the end is still time to go somewhere beyond going. You learn to save someone for a certainty. You learn the end comes in stages, that the heart is starting as the breath leaves and slowly. Where is your heart? Is it here? Has it retreated? We must bring it to the last of the summers. And so much we are not saying about the vanishing moment. When you look into the eyes of the afternoon, you feel the first cool and say, I feel the sky as a mass, like us, but different and too indeterminate. Can we keep moving this more into the sun? It takes energy from us, but what else would we use it for? By the time we are warm, we will be in the center of everything. A great distance and all the windows, many mountains, and still this is nothing. For us to always be a mountain rising from another, a where left to go. This next poem is called Basic Needs, which was the original title of the collection, which is now Pink Salt and may still be changing. But I think it's pretty set at Pink Salt. But I was in Cuba for a while during that short window when we didn't need to have a reason to go to Cuba other than just to be there and see it. That was about 3 years ago now, I think. So I wrote this poem there, and Tracy K. Smith was really kind to include it on her podcast, The Slowdown. So Pavlina, our fellow Gale sister, was so nice to let me know that it came on that morning. So you may recognize this one. This is called Basic Needs. I wrote it while in Cuba. There will be work by late fall. It had been raining in Habana Vieja. It's so hard to not think of you. Privacy is complicated. The famous hotel by the sea. Where did you come from? Where did you come from? Sometimes the verbs aren't important. Thank you for this organization, the conspicuous absence of logos. These mountains, I believe, will absolve me when I remember to look up. Money doesn't always mean what I think it does. It sounds lovely, such red, red berries. I will live in your country, but we can't always be so kind. The real question is not, will we hurt? But what do I do if this is happiness? Okay, and here is the new title poem called Pink Salt. I hope these backstories are helpful. I always try to let the poem stand on their own. The poems stand on their own. I rarely give backstory, but I like some backstory, I guess, when I hear poems. So I'll say a little background on this. My partner, who's a painter and a muralist, he was away on a Fulbright scholarship in Kiev, his hometown where he's from, all of 2 years ago for the academic year. So I went back and forth to Eastern Europe. I had never been, former Soviet Union. So it's really a fascinating place to be. Pink salt. In Kiev, they lived in the middle of the night on brown bread and butter. They ate cucumbers and tomatoes with sunflower oil and pink salt. This was Kiev. They'd already eaten somewhere else, but were so hungry sometimes. It would be fast, but lately it had been simple. Food from the kitchen without having to go out in the dark and snow for what was still at the table. He'd eat and smoke. She'd pace and make hot shapes with her body. In her mouth, she'd put food and look at them in the hallway mirror. He looked like Rodin's sculpture, thoughts in sadness. She didn't think she should return from someone that sad, having little to do with the philosophical. He was a painter who returned to his hometown, given money and time. This was his assignment. This is what we want, isn't it? But art is never as essential as we alone would like to think and be. It's been so hard to do anything, to get anywhere. I don't need myself. I already am me. I don't need any more lessons in humility. Just you, he said. And she felt it exactly, having not written anything or thought to in months. But love was taking turns affecting a rock. But look at all you've been, just you. Or as he said, you be me, I be you. That's love. Once a month, they had said, no months would pass without, and so they hadn't. The flat was tall and old and cold. A small tree blinked day and night. Do you like our tree, do you, he asked. She'd never cared about trees before, or this one, just that it resided there because he did. They'd projected so much on the projector he used for murals, actors on blank walls, the same for their silence, the same for their talking, them of themselves. They'd close their eyes and bite in perfect clarity. When they had the energy, they kept on about white governments and Trotsky. One time they read, one time they went to the ballet. Once she tried to poem him. Once he sketched her. You have so much pose, he said. That's because I'm trying so hard, she said. After she'd become nauseous, she wasn't used to so much swallowing. Are you going to come? Come for me. Yes, yes. If I fell out of love with you, that would make you a woman who didn't know she was in love. In a voice different from their own, they blushed. You know, I would never do any of this if it weren't for you. I promise not to bore you, he said, and she knew this truth to be true. His simplicity, the simplicity of a kind of a life, of the kind of vulnerability she wanted, surprised her still. Bread, butter, salt. Then I took a plane here, then I took a plane here. Okay, thank you so much for listening. And I see comments going. I'm so grateful for that. I'm gonna respond to them. This is the final poem I'll read. It is a cento. If you're not familiar with a cento, C-E-N-T-O, it's a poem of 100 lines from which you pull those lines elsewhere. Poems, lyrics, overheard conversations. So it's a found constructed poem, if you will. My first time really doing this in earnest, and I really found it really challenging and fun, but I really thought the parameters helped. I'm better with constraints, I think, sometimes, so I found those creative. So this is the final poem I'll read. Thank you again for listening and for being here. Poet's Cento with her star. 1. My hands are dirty. My hands are dirty too. I have felt it. How is that possible, luminous beings we are, not this crude matter? Only what you take with you, here, between you, me, other places, the future, the past. It would take 1,000 ships, 10,000, 3 or 4 seasons, a period of civil war. They say it's quite a thing to see, the Dune Sea. We'd fly right through the star, a long time. Fall in. It's like a dream. Its energy surrounds us like we're being watched. I saw a city in the clouds, the tree, the rock, everywhere, closer. I must be allowed to speak. I'm not even sure which planet I'm from. The ground sure feels strange. It's much too rocky. It's too far out of range. It just let go of me and disappeared. I'm standing here in pieces. You know it to be true. Help, I think I'm melting. 2. It's a very long drop, the cave. Remember your failure at the cave? Why did you have to be so brave? That's no moon. I feel the good in you. Good against the living. That's something else. I am defenseless. Ask me again sometime. I feel cold. That is why you fail. Your eyes can deceive you. It won't be easy to hear, but you must. There is no why. You've only just forgotten the one you've been carrying inside. No, there is another. It is the name of your true self, someone who loves you. I can feel your anger. Hear me, rise, my friend. You cannot hide forever. I have felt it, even between the land and the ship. It surrounds us and binds us. Just images, really, feelings, quicker, easier, more seductive. I can feel it. Don't be afraid. You're coming with me. See for yourself. 3. There's something familiar about this place. Where are you? There's something out there. You're safe. I promise I won't hurt you. Star Destroyer. Who are you? Bring her to me gently now. To the horizon, your weapons, you will not need them. You will be an elegant weapon for a more civilized age. You must unlearn what you have learned. We have no time for sorrows. Fighters above you coming in. No disintegrations. Follow me on the next pass. I can't hold them off forever. I saw them. I can't keep the vision out of my head. A danger that looms like a shadow over everything we've built. Patience, my friend. It is the future you see. Always in motion, the future. We're passing through the magnetic field. I can't go alone. Let go. Then we float away. One thing remains. Echo. Echo. Thank you all so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Wow. Whoa, it was delicious.
Oh, thanks.
Provocative.
Juicy Thursday.
What?
Oh, I meant to say, sorry, that cento, all lines were taken from Star Wars episodes 4, 5, and 6. I had so much fun like rearranging that to
Yes.
oh, thank you, Arvid, you're so sweet. Shipra, thank you for these comments. Yeah, I had so much fun, you know, jumbling the puzzle to catch my own vibe. So, Star Wars fan.
Excellent. That's lovely to know. I'm trying to scan and see if there are any actual questions. I know there's tons of comments and you can certainly read those. But I would love to know, does anybody want to put a question into the chat room, specifically something you want Vanessa to address, answer any kind of a question, and I will get to that. I wanted to make one or two observations and then also ask about your process, you know, because we're a writing organization and you can trust that there are people who write that are in this experience today. But I wanted to ask, so it's really interesting to me that you said you were working on a novel.
Yeah.
And the first poem that you read about the restaurant, I don't remember the name, but the restaurant poem, and then also Pink Salt, I noticed.
Yeah.
They were interestingly novelistic poems to me. I was like, okay, this is really, there's an observer, there's sort of an omniscient observer narrator voice in this, talking in the third person or writing in the third person. And so it seemed really distinctive voice and way of approaching the poems as opposed to Prospect Park, which you wrote to a you, which might be the self, might be an other. It's a little bit unclear to me. But yeah. I wondered if you talk a little bit about whether you thought there was something novelistic going on for you, or is this something you do with poems more and kind of pick up that point of view?
Oh, that's such a good question. Thank you for asking me that. So I began, I guess the long answer is some poems come out as they then appear ultimately for me, and then some, I think like all of us, go through a process. On a greater scale, that's in singles, single level. On a greater scale, my whole approach is constantly evolving. I'm someone who absorbs a lot as an observer. I'm pretty introspective, but at the same time, I am always looking out for, what's to orient me. So that's all to say that had begun writing what has become this novel manuscript. It started as memoir notes, and then it kind of grew from there into fiction. So I had started that while I was finishing at the tail end of this manuscript. So there are some poems, and you're so right on. The pink salt poem came as the last poem in the manuscript. So by then I had already started to experiment with nonfiction and then fiction. So I think that there's evidence in Pink Salt of my trying out a narrative voice toward the end. So yeah, there's that. And then you, I think it's such a toggle between the content and the form and how they merge, right? And so the Prospect Park poem that is from a second person perspective might be self-reflexive. I'm not sure yet either what I never have like a complete point or an ultimate incisive point. I try to create language that floats through a few surfaces or floats across a few surfaces. So if the you is ambiguous, I certainly have done that because I wanted to hit various things. I'm always trying to use very simple language in complicated ways, or I try to. I'm not sure if I'm successful, but I really appreciate I think simplicity. There's an elegance in that, and how we syntactically shift that and choreograph those words so that you becomes from stanza to stanza, right? Like it's a 3 stanza thing on my end. I might not read it that way. Of course, like you said, it's always a different exercise looking at something and taking it in with your eyes and not just with your ears, which, as a side note, Kelly, I was remiss to not address your poem that you read, which I really just got sucked into, I think is the right word, because of your initial sensation with your experience of being a grandmother for the first time through sound. And I was thinking of James Joyce and his first line, which is like young Buck Mulligan, and like this assonance. And I thought that was a really interesting way in. I don't often experiment with sound that way. I wish I could. I think your poem is going to, I'm going to sit with that for a while and have that follow me. I usually work off of image and just diction. So I really dug that about your poem. And so, yeah, I think from stanza to stanza, I want that you, just in this small example, to transform and to evolve. Just as the content is moving itself forward, I try to have the perspective. I've been really into perspective because of the novel. And so
Yes.
again, I think Prospect Park was like a more recent poem in the poetry manuscript, which is kind of gliding into my interest as a novelist.
Thank you. I know that there's maybe a couple of questions coming in, but I just want to say that the first poem, the restaurant poem that I'm not remembering the
La
name.
Sloteria, yeah.
It's so peopled. It's so peopled. A lot of the poems you read, I felt like, particularly the first, and then Pink Salt, which I have to vote for that title, Pink Salt. I love it.
Yeah.
And it's just such a fabulous image, and then the way you unpack it into food is beautiful in that poem, and a real sense of the place. But I must say, I was so intrigued by these couples getting together, these people getting together, and what was really emerging about the moment, about the now, but how you really were capturing that sense of how all these selves were coming into that moment. And then the one little element that I thought was really kind of really very much a political statement, if I were looking for the political, as Brenda might tell me to do, and really hopeful, let's split the burden of what this has cost us. That's a fabulous line.
Thank you.
So to think about being in a group, I mean, it's just a beautifully poetic way of suggesting that idea that we could all be splitting the burden, not just a little restaurant experience, but about being in relationships. So anyway, I just have to say how much I appreciated that. Kelly.
Thank you so much. If I could just say quickly, I love dinner scenes in prose, and just there's Lee Young Lee has a really lovely poem called Eating Alone and a counterpart Eating Together. And just the way the table is such a site for, it's just a microcosm, you know? And so I was thinking the
Yes.
way we go out and which seems so anachronistic these days for some of us in New York eating out. But there's always a class consciousness that the characters or my speaker has. And I think that's ever present these days as we start to, unpack where we are right now in 2020, but it's not meant to be reductive. It's just meant to sort of crystallize the basic needs and the basic connections that bring us to a table or apart from a table. So thanks for mentioning that.
Beautiful. Yes, it's almost, it's scenic. It's a scene. And I love how it is like that. I could see it unpacked into a longer play. What beautiful compression is there. I'm hogging things. I have to say, I'm interested. Let's see. Janice says, I'm interested in the cento. If it is 100 lines, is it best to break in segments as you did? I've never attempted one.
Oh, okay. So great question. This is my first attempt too. So my sheets are about 10 that look like this. So they are in tercets, lines of 3. And then that's 99. I also separated them out into 3 sort of chapters or 3 movements. Star Wars is a space opera of sorts, and I was thinking of an operatic cinematic thing. So I had chapters. So there are 3, and whatever the math is, there are 3 lines in each, and then that is a total of 99. And then that replicated echo. That second one is the 100th line. So it did not look like this. One of my favorite things to do with poetry is experiment with the sequencing and the look of it. And I recognize, hi to everyone that who I know and who I've worked with before, new faces of course as well, but those who I've worked with before know that revision for me is where most of the work happens. So you got the raw stuff down, and I would just say to always be open to how it will look. So I literally had a huge block of, I had this marathon one Sunday, just watched all 3 Star Wars and just hung out on the couch, and I was just typing all the lines that I really was interested in, and everything just amassed into this raw chunk. And then I kind of went back to it over the following weeks and started to see what spoke to me and, what would follow what on a line level. And then I pull out and see, okay, what's happening maybe on a stanzaic level. I love tercets. I would highly recommend them. There's something really, I think, clean about them. And I also have such a, my mind gets easily overwhelmed and anxious. So I like a lot of white space when I'm working with my work. So it helps me. It's therapeutic. So 3-line stanzas versus a chunk, which was super overwhelming to me. I had to divvy it up. And so I kind of go through these waves of, a chunk, 2 little chunks, put it back, copy and paste. I've stressed many times. I apologize if you're hearing this for the 17th time, but when you get to that place where you kind of want to explore with the form, I print out the text, and then I will literally strip it with a scissor after every line or after every 3 lines, and then just put it out on a flat surface, and then touch, the tangible aspect of it, and the tactile aspect is really helpful to see what goes where. Oh, I didn't realize that enjambment can happen here, and this could follow that, and it really opens it up. I try not to be the one thing that underlies that and kind of underpins that is very important, which is I never want to know where the poem ends. So I am always down and I'm always open to it telling me where it wants to go. So I'm not someone who comes with like, I have this in mind and this is what I want to get across. It never works that well for me to have that kind of control over it. So I let go a little bit, and the lineation and all of that is one way to do that. I hope that helps a little bit.
I think that it helps a lot. And you also really answered, I think, Leslie's questions in there as well about revision. She wanted to know how much you revise. And I think that was a wonderful mouthful of that. And let's see. Well, there is a wonderful question from Sipra Roy, which she wants you to elaborate on what you mean by to poem him. She says, I love the simple language and simple expression of all the poems that you read, but I have to say I marked that line too. It tripped my ear up wonderfully. To poem him. So I think she's curious about how you came up with that as a verb and what you were getting at in that particular spot.
Yeah. Okay. These are such great questions. I love this. I love the call and response. Okay. Again, just in the spirit of trying to distill, I really am interested in essence and looking at things without the distraction. And for me, that may be tied to, whatever, like I said, mental or emotional space I'm in that I referenced earlier, just being overwhelmed or anxious in this moment or any moment by virtue of being alive. But I tried to get down to the most pithy parts. And having been an English teacher for many years and an SAT teacher and all of, the grammarian in me, I'm really interested in turning a line or tripping your ear, to borrow from Kelly's lovely phrase, in ways that are unexpected. Of course, I think, that's what brings me to poetry. I don't want to know where the line leads. I want to, gasp like, oh shit, I didn't know that would dip off there. And one of the ways I found for me that works really well is to interchange parts of speech. So I'm not necessarily looking for some funky, sophisticated word. I'm looking to change the way what you're expecting. And if you're a native English speaker, you know that should not go like that, right? Like the poem, that's not a verb. So I think, again, it's just me probably late at night when I do my best work. I'm a little over it. I'm a little not sure of myself. And I think that's when I let it go and I say, well, let's try this. And I'll just press delete or, move something around, add an ing, make it a gerund, make it a verb, and swap it out just to see what happens. Because sometimes, and if you're multilingual, you'll know that there aren't words for the words that you're looking to translate. There's just that word in that language. And I think for me, sometimes I can't place the feeling or the vibration. And so it's just, I want to poem him. I didn't know what else to say because that's all I wanted to say.
Well, I have to say that I laughed out loud when you read that line because I just appreciated it so much. I think I get it on a serious level and I get it on a very humorous level too. And in fact, the teacher in me, the lead, wants also to turn it into a writing prompt. Okay, everybody, choose someone in your life and like poem him or poem her, is because you've given us sort of a thing now that we can do. And so
totally. Thank you for picking up on that. I'll tell you, I belabored that line so many freaking times. And I was like, I don't even know what to do here. I just need to toss it. It's not feeling right, but it didn't feel all the way wrong. So I was like, let me give it another second. And I tried that. So I would just say playing with grammar is something. And I'll do that with prepositions too. So where the idiom is, I listened to him. It might be I listened from him. I listened at him. I'll like swap things out because I know they're wrong, but that's all bullshit anyway. I mean, we know the rules to break the rules anyway and transpose them and try new things. And I think that's what I'm pushing for I mean, that's what we're all pushing for, right? To use language to create new language.
But I also have the sense in this poem that you have these characters. One is an artist and one is a poet. And of course, that's probably what they're always trying to do each other, it's like paint or, draw or, and I got the sense of the context in the relationship that it was sort of the way two artists living together are bringing their genres like to the.
And you can, and to that point, that's such a great point too, because it's hard to capture anything, the likeness of anything. And so what's the word that gets near to that? We're approaching likeness, we're approaching reality, but it's a likeness, so why not do that with language too, grammar specifically.
So great. That's wonderful. There's one last question, even though we may be running over a little bit, I'm going to go ahead. There was about influences or the poets you're reading, anyone especially inspiring to you these days? Is there anything you want to mention?
Okay, so forgive me, I've been in novel writing mode, but I think, and poets make such great novelists as well. I'm thinking of The Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath. If you haven't read that, that's a really interesting poetic Romana Clef. Like a very light veil on her life when she was working at Teen Vogue, I believe. Right. But I actually just went back to, in our COVID residency, for some of us, if we were able to get some writing time in, I actually have not been reading a whole ton of poets. I'll mention Yun Wei, who is one of my favorite living poets. She's my dear friend. We did our MFA together. She just had a few things accepted. There's a lot of friends that are writing. I mean, Kelly's chapbook that I have that I was paging through the other day. I'm trying to find the poetry and the prose line. And so I just reread Anna Karenina, and I really want to stress, which was just epic. For me to take that in for the first time. But I really have to say, Virginia Woolf's The Waves, I've never read her in completion. And a friend of mine who passed recently, she was a Virginia Woolf expert. And she said The Waves is the one to go to. So I was like, okay, let's check out The Waves. And she's doing such poetic thing, like to break genre. And so I would say, check the poetry of The Waves, which is a novel. It's technically a novel, but yeah, I think that's what comes to mind. And then of course, I have some people that I'll be doing for Kelly mentioned my workshop that I'll have women on, labor in women's poetry, contemporary women's poetry. So I'm thinking again about, all the ways we're working as women, all the myriad meanings of that. So I'll have some new contemporary women that are writing for that. And I'm happy to send that, off to Kelly after, so we could, or Margaret Atwood started with poetry. Again, all of these wonderful novelists that began with the line, and then use that to build these cities.
That's wonderful. And I've written those in the chat room for anybody, and particularly
for the question.
I know we attract listeners from around the world, and maybe some of these titles aren't familiar to you, and we hope you will look those up. But so I just want to mention, since we're going to move into the open mic, since you mentioned, I'm so glad you mentioned the advanced craft workshop. We're going to be hosting 4-week webinars, 4 90-minute live webinars with Vanessa. It starts on Wednesday, January 13th. It's a daytime. I can't seem to see which day, which it's during the day, midday.
I think it's Wednesdays at like 2 or something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to say that here. This is a limited space workshop. There are only 12 spots in this workshop. I tell you that registration is open. I'll put the registration information into the chat room just to give you a heads up. 12 people, advanced craft with Vanessa. And it's called This Woman's Work. What is the relationship of women to work? to labor in its myriad personal and political iterations. How do we convey this relationship through poetry? So that's going to be the focus, and I'll put that link in there. I'm going to suggest that everybody who can go ahead and unmute for a minute so we can have a round of applause and thanks for Vanessa. And
Woohoo!
woo! Thank you. Wow.
Yay!
Very inspiring.
Yeah.
Will that
Much.
workshop
Thank you so
cost
much.
will that workshop cost anything?
Of course.
There is a cost for that, for Vanessa's upcoming workshop. A good question. There are a few different ways that you can purchase the different packages and bundles that we have, and I'll see if I can find that information for you. I don't know that part, but I will get it for you. Okay, thank you. Vanessa, I know you're going to hang in there, and we are going to, Katerina, I'm going to have you unmute, if you would. I'm going to remove the spotlight, and I'm going to say just thank you to Vanessa, and I'm going to unrecord. I'm going to stop recording.